I don't like sand.
I don't like this movie. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about Attack of the Clones. So Attack of the Clones is the second prequel in the Star Wars franchise, and this one tries to tell the story of Anakin and Padme. It tries to tell the story of the Attack of the Clones, you know, the main title of the movie, and it also, in some parts, tries to tell the story of Anakin going to the dark side. It has a few cues in there that happens, but in most of it, it just kind of fails. So let's talk about the movie. So Attack of the Clones is a movie that I'm not too fond of. Just like The Phantom Menace, it has a lot of the same issues for me. So yeah, it does actually have some improvements over the last one. That stuff is, Ewan McGregor, I did like him in the last one, but I like him a lot more here. He's really come into his character as Obi-Wan, and I feel like he does a really good job. He does have the best lines in the entire movie. He actually has two lines that made me laugh. And this one, most of the comedy is terrible, but there's two lines that were actually really good. Well, actually not really good, they were just fine. But anyways, he is the best character. I really like the third act of this movie. I feel like the third act is better than the last one. The last one has a better lightsaber duel, but this one just has a better third act. And those are actually most of my positives with this movie, though. The pacing is still really boring. I'd say it's kind of the same structure as the last one. You know, it's got a first act that is just kind of very but it's at least moving, and then the second act slows down, it's really boring, uninteresting, and then the third act, it picks back up again. With this movie, though, it does have a first act that is, I'm going to say it's not terrible. It's just kind of very just like the last one. But I gotta say, the second act of this movie is somehow worse than the second act of the last one. If you guys saw my last review, which is on my channel if you guys want to see what I thought about The Phantom Menace, but if you guys saw my last review, you know that the second act was my biggest issue with The Phantom Menace, because it was just boring and uninteresting. But with this movie, it's just laughable. The second act is just completely laughable. I laughed my ass off in the second act of this movie because there is just so many lines of dialogue that are just so cheesy and corny, and the acting is just so bad that I just laughed so hard. And actually, you know what, it kind of looped around to me actually having fun with the second act, because the love story in this movie is horrendous. I mean, this is probably one of the worst love stories ever. So one of my biggest issues with this love story is that they start off at the beginning of this movie where Anakin is seeing Padme, you know, for the first time in 10 years, right? But then by the end of this movie, and I think this movie went over for like, what, a day or two? I don't know how long this movie went over, but they get married at the end of this movie. It's like that love story was the most rushed thing ever. And it just, oh my god, it was so bad, guys. Some of the scenes in this movie, like, it's just, so, like, if you actually had a girlfriend and then you said some of the lines, like, if I had a girlfriend and I said some of the lines that Anakin says, she'd probably run away from me, because he gives the creepiest looks, the creepiest lines. He goes like, sorry, milady, didn't mean to do that. Look, it's really honestly creepy what he does. Anakin is a moody teenager in this movie. He's a big pervert, and I don't have any, at least with the last movie, he was a kid, so yeah, kids are kind of annoying sometimes, so I'll give him that. But this movie, they could have improved over Anakin, but they didn't. They chose Hayden Christensen to play him, and Hayden Christensen is just not a very good actor. I'm sorry, he's just not very good in this movie. He's pretty bad, and it's just not very good. So all the lines that he says are completely stale. He has very few emotion throughout this entire film, and it's just the thing that frustrates me the most is that they could have improved. They saw that the fans were not impressed with Anakin the last movie, so they could have made Anakin a better character in this movie. He's he's written well. He's a written well character. He's not executed. He's good on paper. They executed it horribly in this movie. And the title had no reference to the movie whatsoever. The title is just Attack the Clones. It happens in the last 20 minutes of the movie, and the first 2 acts of the movie are stuff that's not relevant to Attack the Clones whatsoever. It's not horrible, you know, like, they could have, like, okay, I'm gonna say this. The love story was a good idea on paper, because they had to nail that down, right? They had to get the love story down, because then without the love story, or without that, then Luke and Leia would have not existed, right? So they had to nail that down. But they executed just so horribly that it was just really bad. And I was happy when it went back to Ewan McGregor's storyline, because his storyline, while it wasn't even very good, it was better because I like Ewan McGregor, and his storyline was just a whole lot better in this movie. Like, if I do actually have some positives to say with Anakin and Padme's storyline somehow, and that mostly just comes down to when he finds his mom and he holds her in her arms, and he has this look on his face that makes it look like Hayden Christensen is about to take a huge crap, but he has this look on his face that he looks really pissed off. He looks angry, and it plays kind of like the Darth Vader music. So they made an attempt, at least, in this movie, to turn him over to the dark side and kind of have this dark edge on him. They made somewhat of an attempt. And it was actually really emotional when you see him carrying his mom and everyone's just kind of looking at him. But then it's quickly ruined by this.
I killed them all. They're dead. Every single one of them. And not just the men, but the women. And the children, too. They're like animals, and I slaughtered them like animals. I hate them.
There's George Lucas dialogue for you right there. There's some George Lucas dialogue. Oh my god. Ugh. Yeah, this movie, it just, oh my gosh, I had so many issues with it. The third act is really fun, though. I have to admit that. When I was a kid, I loved this third act. Like the stadium and the monsters and stuff. And it was just really fun. And I really liked that. And then the Jedi actually do things. One of my issues with The Phantom Menace is that Mace Windu, he doesn't do anything in that movie. But in this movie, he actually does stuff. And it's actually really cool when they're all like in the stadium and they all got their lightsabers and they're all just... It's actually pretty cool. And I was having a lot of fun with that. But my biggest issue with this third act actually is when it actually gets to the lightsaber duel, you know, between Count Dooku and Obi-Wan and Anakin. It's they had to like edit around the Count Dooku's actor's face or the fact that he's old, so he can't really do that much. So it's a lot of just a bunch of close-ups of them just kind of going like this, and it looks pretty bad. There's one cool shot where Anakin has 2 lightsabers and he's just kind of doing that. But I can't really say much positives about that. When Yoda comes in and then starts doing barrel rolls in the air, it's kind of weird, but kind of fun at the same time, but then kind of really silly. So I'm kind of mixed on that. I do think it's fun, but it's also just really silly and weird. But I was actually glad to see Yoda finally in action. So that was a really fun thing to see. There's not much more to say about this movie. I know I could probably ramble on a lot of this movie, but it's been out for so long. You probably heard all the criticisms on this movie, all the dialogue and everything. It's just so bad. So I'm not gonna ramble on too much about this movie because there's just not that much to say. Yes, there is positives for this movie. I did really enjoy that third act. The score is still really good. The sound design is still really good. And everything like that. So, and the Ewan McGregor, still really good. Like I said, the third act, really like that. There's 2 lines dialogue that made me laugh, but then every other line of dialogue made me laugh, but I don't think the writers were, or the director wasn't wanting me to laugh. He was probably wanting me to feel emotion, and all I felt was like, ha, this is pretty stupid. Oh, I just remembered one more thing actually. Jar Jar is toned down, so they actually listened to one thing about the fans. Jar Jar is not really in this movie for that long. Except he's still really annoying when he's on screen, because it's just the voice. He doesn't actually try to crack jokes. It's just the voice. And yeah. I know I sound super negative on this movie, because I am. Because this movie is it's way more frustrating than the last one, because they could have improved. They listened, the fans have told them what was wrong with that movie. They're like, hey, this wasn't very good. You guys can fix that. And then they're like, okay, so what the fans really want is some really cheesy love dialogue and a really rushed love story, and like just really bad green screen too, because the green screen in this movie is so bad. It's horrible. But there's actually one part in this movie towards the third act where there's a bunch of like sand that gets blown everywhere, and then these clone troopers and droids are shooting each other through the sand, and that actually looked really good. That was some really good CGI right there. So there's one moment in this movie with good CGI, and there's some other moments too that look fine in the third act, but the first two acts just have some really bad CGI. So I was not impressed by that at all. Alright, so that's my review of Attack the Clones. I really just don't want to talk about this movie that much longer. On its own, it's probably like in my grades, probably a D or a D+. But because it's a Star Wars movie, and because it fits somewhat well into the Star Wars timeline and everything kind of falls into place there, I can't do that. So it kind of gets a bye because it's Star Wars. So with all that said, I am going to give Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, a C-. You guys, thank you so much for watching this review. If you did, stay tuned for my Revenge of the Sith review, which I'm probably going to be releasing next week. I might release some more reviews. I just don't have any plans to see any more movies. So, yeah, but I'm actually excited to watch Revenge of the Sith. So, that's something that's good, right? Attack the Clones, if you are doing a Star Wars marathon in quarantine, just like me, I'd still watch it. It still fits into the prequel saga really well. If you skip it, I don't think anybody would mind, but you can still watch it. So, you can probably just skip to the third act, to be honest, and just watch that. But enough about the Attack of the Clones movie, so stay tuned for more, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you did, I did actually want to say a lot more about this movie, but I didn't want to ramble on just like what I did with The Phantom Menace. I wanted to make this review a bit shorter. So anyways, thank you guys so much, and stay tuned for more. Bye.